Where do the reports come from? Did you get an initial?
One PodVader.
That's football.
Every angle of the NFL covered.
All that kind of stuff, I get it.
This,
no question about it,
is Next Fan Up.
We're going to unleash hell here in December.
Hello and welcome to another wonderful division preview from your friends at the Next Fan Up podcast. Hey everybody, it's PodVader here. Today is the AFC South. It's going to be a hotly contested division. I remember, this is our 6th year of previewing all the divisions. I remember back in the day, this was one of the worst divisions in football, and now we're right up there. It's one of the best. Wouldn't you say so, James, our Eagles superfan, who joins me on all of our division previews?
But yeah, definitely one of the more contested ones. Best? Not quite yet. They need a couple of more representatives in that big game at the end of the year before I can go that far.
Well, I did say one of the best, but definitely hotly contested is I think the perfect way to describe this particular division.
Absolutely.
We will get through everything about the Jaguars, the Titans, the Colts, and the Texans in just a moment. But hey, if you've been listening to these division previews and you have something you want to share with us, send us your thoughts via email, nextfanup@gmail.com. You can do it via Twitter if you like a shorter form and making your comments public at NFU Podcast. And we can continue the conversation on Facebook, facebook.com/NFU Podcast. And of course, if you just found us, thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe or follow us wherever great podcasts are heard: Apple, Google, Spotify, Pandora. People love us on Pandora. And tell a friend, because, hey, we could use more friends to talk football. Because quite honestly, what else is there to do? I think, James, we haven't gone into this topic very much, and I don't really want to, but I mean, over this quarantine period, we were dying for some football.
Yeah, and,
probably a bad choice of phrase, too.
Yeah, nice pun, if you will. But football has been sorely missed, and honestly, it's kind of the XFL's fault. Because I don't know how much of you watched of the limited 5-6 week season they had earlier this year, but it was actually very good.
Very good? Come on. That's hyperbole.
No, that's not hyperbole. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't great. I wouldn't necessarily call it NFL caliber, but there are some teams in the NFL that should be relegated to college football. But the product on the field was significantly much better than what Vince McMahon tried to roll out 10 years ago in the first iteration of the XFL.
Yes.
When he put the teams together, then they had what was basically a 6-week mini camp and then rolled out the season. There was no chemistry on any of the teams, and it took basically to the end of the season before you saw what looked like normal football for the average viewer or even the staunch football fanatic. This year they came out the gate swinging because they actually had about a 3.5, 4 month period where they had their training mini camps to allocate, as far as where these teams are allocated, so that they can build some type of camaraderie and chemistry so that when they came out there week 1, it wasn't just everyone tripping over themselves. And again, they did some things that the NFL was sure to be adopt in the next year or two, just like the first time. The first time they had the Sky Cam, NFL snatched that up. They did some things as far as, the celebrations and the players' personalities showing out. The NFL relaxed its rules as far as celebrations then. Now we had officials in the booth, replays basically being reviewed by that official in the booth every single play so that he could buzz down to the field and be like, hey, let's stop this play because on that previous play, you missed something. Or, I got a better angle of that interception or fumble, or did he actually fumble? Was the ball actually caught? All those things that we complain about every single play as far as when we see replay, well, the officials should go back and review that and play continues on. That's something the NFL is going to adopt soon too. Just give it time. The NFL likes to drag its heels as far as doing the right thing, but it will eventually do those things. I think those are the two main things the NFL will adopt.
Not to mention very interesting kickoffs, which I think would be something they might consider adopting for safety's sake.
Not so much the kickoffs. I think it's the onside kick. I think the NFL will come around to the onside kick and the point after touchdown conversions. Jacksonville, they had the 1 point for 2 yards out, 2 points for 5 yards out, 3 points for 10 yards out. I think the NFL will slowly go towards that. I'm not going to say like in the next 2 years. That may take a little bit more doing because you still don't want to, remove kickers completely from the flow of the game. You still want to keep that, regular. So the NFL might do is keep the 1 point field goal, but allow variations for 2 and 3 points after the touchdown. Onside kick, I like that idea of a 4th and 15. I'd probably stretch it to like a 4th and 20 because, again, you don't want the success rate to be too high, but at the same time, you don't want it to be so low to where it's not worth trying.
Listen, this sounds like a great idea for another podcast on another day, but we are here to preview the AFC South. Just a reminder, these are my own personal game-by-game predictions. I've gone through every single game of the upcoming 2020 NFL season, and I have picked winners and losers in each and every one of the games. I've also instituted the new concept of lock wins and lock losses. These are games where I have a very high amount of confidence that these are games that they either are absolutely going to win or they are absolutely going to lose. Every other game, quite honestly, I mean, we're in July as you're listening to this. Games that are going to be played in October, November, December, I have no idea how those games are going to play. And frankly, we really don't even know right now how these teams are really going to play out. But this is a great exercise to sort of get your head and your mindset into exactly how you perceive each and every team in the NFL. And the beauty of our show is we try and give you as many different perspectives on these teams as we possibly can with the super fans. So we'll start with the team that I think is going to finish last in this division. Many people have labeled this team as the worst team in football, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I know they reclaimed it again.
I actually don't have them as the worst team in football. If you haven't heard any of our other division previews, I have that as a tie between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Cincinnati Bengals. But I'm not a big believer in the Jacksonville Jaguars at 4-12. I say that. And right before we started recording this particular show, I was taking a quick look over their roster and I went, you know what? This might be the most underrated team in the NFL this season. Their team is not bad. And really, a lot, I think, is going to depend on how much you believe in the mustache magic Gardner Minshew, and it's pretty clear the Jaguars are all in on Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, so much so that Mike Glennon, Jake Luton, and Joshua Dobbs are his backups. So they don't have a choice. I mean, there doesn't look like they want to bring in a veteran into that room where I think one would help. But I guess they figured the last time they brought in a veteran, he threatened Minshew's job. So they want to remove that veteran presence from scaring Minshew, but sometimes fear is a good motivator. It gets you to do things better. Maybe that, last year with Nick Foles there in the quarterback room, maybe he learned something. I don't know, but he didn't look comfortable at times, and other times he just looked like he was going with the flow, like the game didn't hinge on his performance. And that's not going to be the case in this division this year, should there be one. He's going to have to put up solid numbers and be more consistent in his play. He does have talent around him at the skill positions. Leonard Fournette, when he's not being a head case or injured, DJ Shark Jr., Dede Westbrook, Chris Conley, Keelan Cole, Laviska Shenault, who they drafted, Tyler Eifert, and Josh Oliver at tight ends. So he's got the skill position players around him. These guys are very talented. It's a nice group. And the way this offense is schemed, he shouldn't struggle that much. I mean, the average quarterback should be able to go 8-8 with this offense. he's got to find a way to make it work.
And it really is this. I mean, you just labeled it, and you even forgot to mention they brought in Chris Thompson from the Washington Redskins to give Leonard Fournette that change of pace back to pair up with. This all centers on Gardner Minshew. I talked to you before we started about the offensive line. This is not the worst. This isn't the worst offensive line that we've previewed in any of these previews. Cam Robinson at left tackle, Andrew Norwell at left guard, Brandon Linder at center, AJ Khan at right guard, and Jawan Taylor at right tackle. It's not the best offensive line, but it's certainly not the worst. Definitely.
It's a sustainable line and very well could be one of the more solid lines in the league. Probably if you're ranking 1 to 32, I'd put them somewhere between 20 and 15.
Yeah, and I might go a little higher. I might say that they were 15 and up. I don't know if they're top 10. They might be 11.
Probably not top 10. They could threaten that, but yeah, I'm being probably a little bit more realistic than your optimism.
That's always my favorite when somebody says, "Listen, they're not top 10, but they're 11."
Yeah, right there on the door, just knocking.
But yeah, I mean, it all comes down to the mustache, and then obviously on defense, they have jettisoned some very big name free agents, and there's still one who they have a franchise offer to, Yannick Ngakoue. We're going to still see where he ends up. Ultimately, my guess is he still ends up playing here in Jacksonville unless somebody offers them a no-brainer type deal. And he will be key to help this defense as a pass rusher on the defensive line, along with their number one pick, Josh Allen from last season. Aubrey Jones and Taven Bryan are your defensive tackles. They drafted Devon Hamilton in the 3rd round, so they've got some depth there. Their linebackers, Miles Jack, Joe Schobert, and they drafted Clavion Chasen to go, and Rashawn Melvin is on that linebacking core. So their front 7 is definitely the strength of their defense. We'll talk about the secondary in just a second.
Yeah, the front 7, look, almost every big name they've had over the years, and this is one of the more feared defenses in the league, is gone except for Yannick Ngakoue. Miles Jack is still there, who they use sometimes in pass rushing downs. This front 7 is young, and they're basically rebuilding from scratch through the draft, and so far they haven't missed in the first round. You mentioned Josh Allen, very solid defensive end. Guys can get up to the passer. Solid rookie season because he had Calais Campbell there, to eat up a lot, take up a lot of the attention from him. Now he has to be the guy as far as that defensive line goes. He's got to be that anchor. He's got to be the person that draws the attention so other guys can get to the quarterback and make plays.
The secondary, actually, Rashawn Melvin's a cornerback. Pardon me, everyone. I didn't eat the proper breakfast this morning. Rashawn Melvin is the left corner. DJ Hayden at right corner. Trey Herndon is there. CJ Henderson they drafted in the 1st round. So the Jaguars have a history of, we're just going to draft a whole bunch of young corners and see how they develop, and then they'll probably develop to be great corners, and then we're just going to let them go. It's honestly what the Jaguars have done for years. And their safeties, Ronnie Harrison, Gerard Wilson. I mean, this is definitely the weakness of this defense. It's young, and it doesn't instill fear in opposing offenses.
No, and that youthfulness is going to get picked on a lot because when we get it, yes, they're young, they're talented, but they don't have a ton of experience to back up this front 7. And that's pretty much going to be a detriment, as the season goes along. But if they can get to the midpoint where they're, not giving up big plays, and they don't expose themselves too much to be vulnerable to, any gadget plays that are thrown out there, it can still be a solid defense and still the foundation of this team going forward. But it's definitely something to build on because, again, there's youth all over the place on both sides of the ball. Just getting it to mature into form when each of these players hits their third, fourth year so that you can have a solid nucleus to build upon.
So the Jaguars, I've got them finishing 4-12, no lock victories, but I do have them with 4 lock losses. Week 15 at the Ravens, week 13 at the Vikings, week 10 at the Packers, and week 2 at the Titans. And James, it just so happens we are joined now by our Titan superfan, Jordan. Jordan, we're talking about the Jaguars, whom I have predicted as the worst team in your division. The floor is yours.
Well, hello. It's good to be back. My biggest worry about the Jaguars this year is that they're going to be getting the number 1 pick next year and getting Trevor Lawrence. I think they're kind of going for that. It's amazing how much this division likes to just send their talent away. I mean, they traded Calais Campbell, and the Jags the past couple of years have just had a great defense, and now a lot of that defense is gone. And they're rolling with Gardner Minshew, who is a great personality and very likable, but I don't know how many teams would really want him as a starting quarterback at this point. So I think the Jags are going to be contending for one of the worst records, not just in our division, but probably in the entire league.
We actually just finished saying, as we were going over their roster, this might be the most underrated team in the NFL. And it does pretty much the way this team is going to go all depends on how Gardner Minshew performs this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I mean, they do have some good, like DJ Chark is pretty good, but I think their identity is built around kind of Leonard Fournette, who's not even happy to be there. And I don't even know if their defense is going to keep them competitive anymore because they've lost so much talent. I know they do have, they had a lot of draft picks, but I think for me, I think the Jags are going to be like the kind of the break point in this division, whereas the Colts, Texans, Titans, all those games are going to be competitive. I think the Jags will probably be one of the easier games on the schedule. Which makes me happy. Derrick Henry loves to play against the Jags, so I love having them on the schedule.
Well, when you talk about teams that like to trade away their talent, let's go to the team I've picked as third in your division with a record of 8-8, 1 lock victory, 1 lock loss. The Houston Texans. Bill O'Brien has rendered this roster. Oh boy, what has he done? What has he done? You trade away DeAndre Hopkins, you get David Johnson in return. He is listed as the starting running back because they obviously hate Duke Johnson, whom they acquired from Cleveland the previous year. There's no depth behind those 2 running backs. You have Deshaun Watson still, and you did acquire Brandon Cooks, but this is Brandon Cook's 4th team, I believe, in 3 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why Brandon Cooks has the talent, but there's a reason he keeps getting traded and moved to other teams. Will Fuller, Kenny Stills, and Kiki Kuti are all made of glass, and Randall Cobb showed last year in Dallas that he is not the Randall Cobb we all got to know and love in Green Bay. His career is definitely in the twilight. I just don't see where the offense is going to come here, James.
Oh, it's coming from Deshaun Watson. In case you haven't been paying attention over the last couple of years, since his rookie season, he burst on the scene. The one for that, ACL tear, I think week 6 or 7 of his rookie year, he would have been Rookie of the Year that season. But the offensive line hasn't gotten any better. They still have Tunsil, who they acquired from the Dolphins last year. Telemete from, oh my gosh, this guard, the middle of this, the interior of this line Kelemete, Martin, Fulton, Howard at the other tackle. These guys have to do a better job of pass blocking. They also have to commit to running the football more times than throwing. And this is where Bill O'Brien, the coach, gets Bill O'Brien, the GM, in trouble. And that goes the opposite way as well, because Bill O'Brien shouldn't have both jobs. He should focus on one or the other. We've seen the boneheaded decisions that, him as the GM has made over the last several seasons. And the head scratcher this offseason, okay, fine. Hopkins may be angling for the highest paid the highest contract of any wide receiver ever in the next couple of years. But you get rid of him, and like you said, the remaining returning wide receivers, Fuller, Stills, and QT, were all hurt at some point last year. And, QT and Fuller were probably the best options to throw to when Hopkins was drawing double and triple teams. But now that all these guys are out there, and granted they're healthy, do they still draw attention from the other to allow all of them to produce, or do they take a step back? It's kind of the same situation we talked about with Smith-Schuster in Pittsburgh when Brown left. Can he step into the role? Well, one of these guys has to step up and be the guy. They can do it as a group by committee. That'll be fine. But someone has to be that reliable target that Deshaun Watson goes to on third down when he's scrambling, desperation time. Which one of these guys is going to step up consistently and be that guy that Watson leans on? Subsequently, I don't like the quarterback depth behind Watson. A.J. McCarron, Alex Mago, Nick Tiano. I just hope Watson stays healthier this year than last year when he had basically a broken rib that almost punctured a lung to the point where he had to take a bus from one city to the next in the middle of the season because he couldn't get on a plane for fear that it might kill him.
Come on, you don't like Alex Mago very far?
No.
Alex Mago, throw it deep?
Mm-mm.
I'm just having fun with the name Mago. Jordan, I will give the Texans one thing on offense is their wide receivers are fast, but their tight ends and their running backs are slow.
Yeah, they definitely have speed. It seems like they're almost sort of trying to model the Chiefs on offense, but with worse players.
The poor man's Chiefs? Is that what we just called the Houston Texans?
Oh, man.
I don't know. I get what you're saying there, but if this is modeling after the Chiefs, their artist
is not good.
Really bad.
Well, their artist is Bill O'Brien, so yeah,
right.
I agree with that. I really can't believe, I don't know how I got so lucky, because it was less than a year ago today that I was celebrating the retirement of Andrew Luck, and now the Texans give me the gift of just sending Hopkins away, who's just been tormenting the Titans and the whole division. And so they're just so much less scary, less intimidating on offense. I mean, you're never going to count them out because Watson is a magician. He's amazing. But without having Hopkins there, I mean, replacing him with Cooks, it really is. They're just going for straight speed and not much else. So, I mean, good luck to them, but I don't think they're going to be. They were in such a good spot. It's crazy. They were up 24-0 on the Chiefs in the playoffs, but I think it's going to be a fast downhill turn for them. So I think they are much less threatening this year than they were the year before. I can't wait to actually root for DeAndre Hopkins now. So I'm just so happy that Bill O'Brien is still there. I hope he has a long tenure with Houston. He's doing great things for them.
On the defensive side of the ball, I'm not 100% sure if this depth chart I'm looking at is correct, but it has Angelo Blackson as their starting defensive end, along with J.J. Watt and Eddie Vanderdoes at nose tackle. They did draft Ross Blacklock in the second round, who would take over at nose tackle. Maybe Charles Omenihu would be the other defensive end over Angelo Blackson. I've never heard of Angelo Blackson. Sorry, Blackson family. Sorry, Angelo. And it says that you're from New England, which makes it even worse because I don't remember you ever on the New England Patriots.
You don't remember a Patriot?
Yeah. That's if I can't remember who you are and you're supposedly from the Patriots, it says a lot. Their linebackers, though, I did mention J.J. Watt. When he is healthy and he is motivated, he is definitely one of the best defensive ends in the league. There's no question about that, but he is getting older and he is coming back from more injuries. He didn't have any last year, but I'm just saying, like, J.J. Watt is getting older. He's not getting younger. And Whitney Merciless, Zach Cunningham, Bernadette McKinney, Brennan Scarlett, they're a talented linebacking core for sure. But there's some age there too with Whitney Merciless.
Zach Cunningham as well. And Pod, this is the only double-digit win team in the league last year to give up more points than it scored. So this unit as a whole needs to get younger, like, fast. And I know that, going youth does eliminate some experience, but like you said, there's too many guys in the front seven getting towards the end of their careers. And Watt this season, should it happen, is playing for zero guaranteed money. He can renegotiate his contract, sign an extension, whatever. He decided not to do that and decided to earn his projected salary for this year and stave off contract negotiations. So that's his motivation going into the season. Hopefully he does not get hurt because he will not get paid.
Right. That's while it's an admirable thing from a philosophical standpoint, it's a stupid thing from a business standpoint.
Get that money, man.
Jordan, the secondary of the Texans has also taken some hits along the way, and we're looking at Garyon Conley, Bradley Roby, Vernon Hargraves, Phillip Gaines, Lonnie Johnson Jr., Keon Crossan, whom I do remember with the Patriots, Justin Reed, Eric Murray are your starting safeties. I mean, not a lot that scares you in the back end of the defense.
Yeah, I think James was pretty spot on in his analysis that he wrote, where he said they're basically trotting out J.J. Watt with no noticeable additions on defense, and it's like, they might think maybe on offense you could have one player like Deshaun Watson carry your team, but it doesn't work like that on defense. You can't just have one good player. You need to have good players throughout the defense. I think their defense has kind of been like withering away a little bit over the last couple of years. They lost Clowney and they lost Tyrann Mathieu. And they haven't really, Garyon Conley is the guy they signed. And, I don't think he's really that great, a former first-round pick that didn't work out in Oakland. So their defense is really, I would just describe it as uninspiring and unintimidating. I think they're going to be maybe about average, but average at best, I would say. So you got to worry about J.J. Watt, but you're right. The rest of it is not too scary.
I'm glad you reminded me of Texans James preview. 2020 season, I set the over-under at 10.5 regular season games played per team and will take the under. This will give Knob yet another baked-in excuse for underachieving. There have been tons of pieces out there this year about Knob being a truly underrated coach, even if he is in over his head at the GM spot. These pieces are half right, as evidenced by yet another humiliating playoff loss last year after a squeaker against the Bills. Knob underrated coaching is really Deshaun Watson's overachieving. To recap, he somehow turned DeAndre Hopkins and Nuke's desire for more money into Brandon Cooks, David Johnson, and less cap space than he started with, which should have been enough on its own to get Knob ousted. Then he handed out the fattest left tackle contract because he had no leverage, and Tunsil probably ran out of things to ask for. This after giving Randall Cobb a payday not too dissimilar than what Hopkins had been making. Odds of them staying healthy is virtually nil, especially when he's trotting our J.J. Watt again with no noticeable additions on defense. Will Fuller is still hanging around the trainer's table on a routine basis along with his other oft-injured offensive weapon draft picks. Those roster moves, after accounting for injuries, will make even an 8-win campaign look like an accomplishment. Working against him, though, is the fact that the rest of the division has finally gotten their stuff together. He used another word other than stuff. Colts seem to have at least found a stopgap quarterback, putting them in a tie for pole position in the division with the Titans. I'll put the Texans above the Jags, but only because the Jags are looking at an iffy quarterback situation with their best offensive player, not just a running back, but a disgruntled one looking to be traded. Smart money is on the Texans starting 0-3 at Chiefs, home Ravens, at Steelers. Well, let's take a quick peek here. What do I see? Oh, I have a little more optimism. I have the at Steelers game as a victory for the Houston Texans. So look at that. I'm more optimistic than the super fan. Weeks 4 through 7 aren't much better heading into the week 8 bye, but a likely 2-2 record, 1-1 in the division over that time will be enough for the water to be boiling on knob. All right. Let's see here. Oh no, this is where I disagree. I've only got them with 1 victory against the Jaguars, 3 losses against the Vikings, at Titans, and the Packers going into the bye. Still the same record. I've got them at 2-5 going into week 8. Yeah. All right. Let's see. What else did Mr. James here have to say? I keep hitting the wrong buttons here. That's when the Texans will somehow go 5-1 against the soft part of their schedule, putting them at 7-6 and in a feisty spot for the wild card. They will then lay their annual egg against the Colts, where TY will somehow will get someone a cool 10 for 250 and 2 to propel their sorry fantasy team to the second round of the playoffs, because the Texans get a dead cat bounce against the Bengals, leaving the season up to a road game against the Titans. They'll lose this game handily since it's a de facto playoff game, but because of the expanded playoff rule and because there is no mercy in this pat crap universe, the Texans will sneak into the playoffs, securing Knob another season just before losing by the opening line of Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. My goodness, somehow this will only affirm Knob's status as a coach that overachieved with what he was given, completely missing the point that he was the one who saddled himself with this team. This, of course, will lead to an offseason where the Get Out trilogy of Dwayne Brown, Jadeveon Clowney, and DeAndre Hopkins plead with Watson that he's not safe in Houston either, and it's time to move on too. Unlike when other high-profile athletes leave their team, there will be no jersey burning, and it will be met with the collective sigh of, yep, can't blame him for that one. If that's too optimistic, let me know. No, James, I don't think there was any optimism at all. And I've got your team at 8-8, but I do see exactly what he's saying, because after the bye week, I actually do give them that 5-1 shot from week 9 through week 14, because it's at the Jaguars. At the Browns is their one loss that I give them in week 10, then beating the Patriots, at Lions, beating the Colts, beating the Bears in Chicago, their lock victory against the Bengals week 16, but losses at the Colts and losses to the Titans in week 17 finished them at 8-8. And thus they miss the playoffs, even with the expanded playoffs. But that's the Texans. We spent a lot of time on the 2 worst teams of the division. Here come the Colts, who I have finishing in second in the division at 9-7. And the Colts' big move was the acquisition of a quarterback by the name of Phillip Rivers. And the question I have for you, James, is does Phillip Rivers bring the Chargers look great on paper in the preseason hype, and then they ultimately stink? Or does he actually provide the Colts an upgrade at quarterback?
It's the former, definitely not the latter. Look, anybody who's watched the Chargers play the last 3 years, you've heard me, for lack of a better word, belittle the play of Phillip Rivers because it wasn't much to talk about. Our own superfan last year said, and I quote, he shot puts the ball down the field because his arm literally looks like a noodle when he's throwing. There's like whatever talent, strength, skill set he had in his throwing arm has all but diminished. And you can say maybe he overstayed his welcome in San Diego /LA with the Chargers franchise a little bit too long. Fine. but change of scenery is not going to make his body younger. Remember, he was drafted the same year as Eli Manning and Ben Roethlisberger. He's approximately the same age. And aside from 2 Super Bowl appearances, or basically 2 Super Bowl rings, he has identical stats virtually with Eli Manning. and that's not a good thing. Yardage, fine. Touchdowns, okay. But interceptions, soul-crushing, inopportune time interceptions. And he himself has led the league in picks about twice in his career. This is a job that he's not going to hold on to for the entire season. I'm going over their schedule here at the beginning, and I would say if they come out 2-2, because they got Jaguars, Vikings, Jets, Bears in the first 4, maybe he holds on to the starting job. But Browns, Bengals, Lions, Ravens being the next 4, somewhere around there, he's just going to crap the bed, and they're just going to not have a choice but to turn it back over to Jacoby Brissett, who should have never lost his job in the first place. Understand last year that the Colts were 7-9, should have been 9-7 at worst if it wasn't for the previous backup to Jacoby Brissett, who's now back in Indianapolis, I believe. I'm sorry, not Indianapolis, New England. What's his name? Hoyer.
Oh, Brian Hoyer. Yeah.
Brian Hoyer crapping the bed last year and costing them 2 games that Brissett missed due to injury. So you take away those 2 L's he took, and one of them was the first victory Miami got last year. And we all said Miami was tanking for Tua. Granted, they still got Tua, but the Dolphins had no business beating the Colts last season when they did. That was Hoyer's fault. So, I mean, you can say on paper they got better at quarterback, but Phillip Rivers is only better in name only, not by talent at this point in his career.
Their first part of the schedule that you just laid out is actually, I mean, this is where it's Phillip Rivers has to perform to the Phillip Rivers that is perceived, right? That he has to be great in these games and beat the teams that he's supposed to beat, like the Jaguars, the Jets, the Bears, the Bengals, the Lions. Those are the teams he's supposed to beat. Maybe even the Browns, but I don't have them beating the Vikings, but I also don't have them beating the Browns, but I have them winning those other games. The part of the season that will be difficult for them is right after that. Ravens at Titans, Packers, Titans at Texans. That's their difficult stretch from week 9 to week 13. That's where I see things falling apart for the Colts. But if they can perform, and they have they have the pieces. They have an offensive line now. Anthony Costanzo, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Mark Glowinski, Braden Smith at right tackle. So they have an offensive line now. T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman, Zach Pascal, Paris Campbell. Probably a little less talent in the wide receiving core than Phillip Rivers had in Los Angeles, but still he's got those pieces around him, and he's got running backs. Marlon Mack. They drafted Jonathan Taylor in the 2nd round, Nyheim Hines, Jordan Wilkins. These are guys that can get the job done on the ground. Jack Doyle at tight end, Trey Burton they picked up as their backup. They have pieces on offense to make it work. It really does come down to Phillip Rivers cannot be a letdown against teams that he should be beating handily. Jordan.
I think the one, kind of what you touched on, the one thing that could give Colts fans optimism is that Rivers will actually have a strong offensive line this year. Probably one of the best O-lines he's had in quite some time. And I think that makes a big difference for him, especially with all the interceptions that James is talking about, is that if he's not facing as much pressure, he might not be making as much mistakes. I think the Colts as a team is built to win without needing as much contribution from the quarterback position. And so I think Rivers has a chance to kind of turn around the trajectory of his career a little bit just because of the offensive line. I do think this lack of offseason is going to hurt them just because, having a new quarterback, a couple young or rookie skill position players between Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, and Paris Campbell in his 2nd year never having played together. I think that might be a challenge going into the start of the season. But I think I am going to disagree with James that I do think Rivers gives them some more upside than Jacoby Brissett does. I think Brissett was kind of more of a game manager for them. I think, he made some nice plays, like running around, making short passes. But when you watch him like week in and week out, I think he really struggled with accuracy downfield. I think Rivers, it makes them a little more threatening, even though I agree that he is risky. But I think this is a solid roster from top to bottom, basically. So I don't think Rivers has to be great. I think he just has to be good. And I hope that doesn't happen, but I think that I would not underestimate the Colts this year. I think they could be a solid team.
Well, and that's where I have the question for you with Rivers. You said he doesn't have to be great. He just has to be good. Can he accept that? Because this is, like you said, this is a team that doesn't need the quarterback to do a lot. They can lean on the running game, and they have in the past. And that's why Brissett pretty much looked more so like a game manager last year when he was in a game. But consistently, he was putting them in positions to win because this stout offensive line was opening up holes for Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines last season. So as long as those two can produce, even with Jonathan Taylor there in the mix in the backfield, can Rivers take a step back? And I'm not saying be a game manager, but do what's required of him in the offense, like I said, not force things and not try to be a GOAT every single time that they go out, because you watch him in San Diego and you can pretty much tell where it's like, okay, this is obviously a running situation, and he's audibling into something where the receivers are running 15 to 20 yards downfield behind that offensive line, and he's getting killed. He can't do that here in Indianapolis, and that's my concern with Rivers.
The defense has an interesting mix of big name talent and no name talent. For instance, on their defensive line, they brought in DeForest Buckner and Justin Houston to pair up with Kamoko Toure and Grover Stewart. Never heard of those guys. Sorry, Toure family and Stewart family. Sheldon Day and Danico Autry also in the mix on the defensive line. Their linebacking core, Bobby, I'm going to mess up his name. Okereke.
That's about as best as I can get.
Close. Anthony Walker, Darius Leonard, of course. So there's some talent in the linebacking core. And then in the secondary, you have Malik Hooker, whom they drafted in 2017, Rock Yassin, whom they drafted last year. They bring in Xavier Rhodes, and who knows which Xavier Rhodes will show up. Julian Blackman they drafted in the third round, with Kari Willis and TJ Carey, Marvell Tell III. It's like I said, I think the defense is interesting. I just don't know if there's enough talent, even with DeForest Buckner and Justin Houston added, to make a big difference defensively for the Colts, Jordan.
That's true, but they have a good scheme where they tend to get the most out of their defense the last year or two. I mean, that's really a big reason they were in games last year. And really some of those names, like Darius Leonard is probably one of the best linebackers of the league. I don't know if he gets as much recognition as he deserves. And Malik Hooker is very solid. And then, Rockiston is decent. You got Houston and Buckner on the defensive line. I think they have a lot of pieces there that they're going to be solid. They might not be at the level of being like an intimidating defense, but I think the defense is enough that it's going to hold teams to 17, 21 points type thing, where their offense is going to keep them in the game, I think. So you're right. I don't think it's like a complete defense that you're intimidated by, but it's enough of a defense that you can't really take lightly, and that you are going to have to really grind out drives against.
And that brings us to the first place team of the division, which is why Jordan is here. It is the Tennessee Titans. I have them finishing the season at 12-4. So a very good, solid record. I have 3 lock victories: week 2 against the Jaguars, week 8 at the Bengals, week 15 against the Lions. Your 4 losses, I have week 3 at the Vikings, week 11 at the Ravens, week 12 at the Colts. And that's usually because I like to split your division games. And then week 16 at the Packers. But otherwise, your schedule is fairly favorable, my friend.
Yeah, I think one of the websites that breaks down schedules had the Titans as the second easiest schedule this season. So that definitely helps. We've gone 9-7 4 straight years now. So 12-4 would be a nice improvement. But yeah, the schedule definitely gets easier. Obviously, we really put this team together towards the end of last season and when Tannehill took over. I think the main advantage we have over the Colts is just the continuity, especially with this offseason. Like we have basically everybody back. On offense, we have 10 of 11 starters coming back. Same coaches, same scheme, same everything. It's just the second year in Arthur Smith's system. So I'm definitely optimistic. I don't think I'm that optimistic actually about 12-4 just because we were kind of inconsistent. I think we tend to play to our level of competition a little bit. So against good teams, like you saw in the playoffs, we can really elevate our game and take it to them. But we also do have some games against worse teams where we're not necessarily as consistent as we need to be. But I do think this is a pretty solid roster all around. I don't know yet, but I'm still kind of thinking we might be getting Clowney, which would change things. But as this roster stands, I think we're right in that second tier in the AFC. Probably, obviously, the Chiefs and Ravens, I think, are at the top. But I think after that, we're up there with anyone else in the AFC.
Your wide receivers, you don't have much depth there. I mean, you're looking at A.J. Brown, Adam Humphries. Maybe we'll throw Corey Davis with those two. But after that, there's nobody.
Well, the one thing I'll say is that it's only been a year, but I can already say, this might sound bold, but A.J. Brown is the best receiver in Titans history, which is not a high bar. But A.J. Brown is a star. And,
are we including the Oilers in that, or are we just talking about the Titans?
I was just talking about the Titans.
Okay.
I don't know. So that's like 21 years. I mean, he had 1,000 yards on only 52 catches. He was just so explosive. Corey Davis, he won't have the stats, but he's always blocking downfield on big plays for Henry and for A.J. Brown. That's not what you look for in a receiver primarily, but in this offense, he helps a lot. The one name I would mention is the speed guy, Khalif Raymond. He's the one who no one will have heard of him, but all of a sudden we'll run Henry 10 plays in a row. We'll be at the 50-yard line, and then we'll have a play action and throw it to the end zone. And that's where Raymond will come in with his one catch for 50-yard touchdown stat line. So he helps. I would agree. It's probably not the deepest position we have, but Cameron Batson also has some speed. But this also isn't a pass-first team where you need that much depth. I mean, there's no secret about the identity of this team. It's run and it's play action. And really it's going to be run through Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown. I also think Jonnu Smith is very explosive with the ball in his hands. Our tight end, he's not built like a normal tight end because he's very fast. We've actually done run plays with him and screen plays to him. So I think we have enough explosion there and enough downfield blocking, even if that's not what you would normally look for in a top receiver. So I think this is kind of just fits with the identity that we are. Like we're going to, our first pick was a right tackle. We're going to focus on running the ball and on play action. And that's how we're going to keep the game short and stay competitive against the best teams.
I mean, to me, it's interesting because yes, it was a budgetary move, right? You move on from Jack Conklin, whom I'm guessing you probably would have still preferred to be on this team, but he's an expensive tackle. You draft a kid in the first round to replace him. It makes sense from a budgetary standpoint, but in a year where the wide receiving core was said to be the deepest, this was one of the teams that did not take part in that belief, or at least didn't share that belief because you didn't draft a wide receiver. You did draft a running back in the third round. And that's sort of my next step is for a team that does like to pound the rock. Derrick Henry can only pound the rock for so many more times before he's just going to wear out. And now his backup is your third-round draft choice.
Yeah, I was really excited about the Darrington Evans pick. Probably no one's heard of him because he was at Appalachian State, but he's a quicker, faster, electric guy who can pass catches. Basically, it's kind of like what we wanted Deion Lewis to be. But it's someone who should be able to play for us on third down, catch passes out of the backfield, and have some explosiveness. I agree. I don't think we want Henry getting 30 carries a game. I think we need to mix things up. And Deion Lewis was really very disappointing for us in the last year or two, where he really wasn't able to do anything. So I think Evans will be a big upgrade. And he is another pass catcher. Like our pass catchers might not all be receivers. They're also going to be the tight end and this running back here. So I do think Evans is going to provide a little more spark out of the backfield where it's not just Henry. And we can mix it up and give Henry some rest because he really likes to come alive in the second half once defenses are tired. So let them chase around Evans a little bit, and then we can come in and pound Henry some more.
Jordan, one last question here about your offense. You know that with everything that you all did last year on your run through to the AFC Championship game, teams are going to be focused on Derrick Henry. And, the talent of the early part of your schedule notwithstanding, a lot of those teams are going to do their best to take away Derrick Henry and put this on Ryan Tannehill. And while he did show some flashes last year because there wasn't much put on him down the stretch of the season because he had the running game to rely on, I think he only averaged about 15, 16 passes per game, including the playoffs. If that number goes up this year and he's relied on more, how confident are you that this team can repeat that success from late in the season across an entire year?
I'm pretty confident in Tannehill because you look at his stats and, he had his passer rating in play action passes was 140.6, which was the best in the NFL. So it fits us perfectly because if defenses, like you say, are playing the run, we have been so good and so efficient off play action. And that's where we got so many explosive plays last year. We would kind of lull defenses in and then we can take the deep shot over the top or give it to AJ Brown. Everyone kind of says Tannehill's going to regress, but I don't know why, because it's going to be the same offense around him, and his volume stats, like yards, might not be as good because we don't pass as much, but his efficiency stats were, I think, much better than most people realize. I think he had the best overall pass rating in the NFL as well, and his yards per attempt was also, I think, in the top 2 or 3. The Titans as a whole, if you just take scoring from week 7 on when Tannehill took over, I believe was right behind the Chiefs and the Ravens in total points. So Tannehill, I think, did a lot. But he impressed me. I honestly was a little skeptical when I love Marcus Mariota, but it was time to switch. I didn't expect Tannehill to be nearly as good as he was. I think Tannehill he might be the best of the non-elite quarterbacks, if that makes sense. I'm not going to sit here and an elite quarterback. You take out all the elite quarterbacks in the NFL, and I'll take Tannehill. It's hard to get an elite quarterback. We don't have that, but I think Tannehill is right up there. So I'm happy with where he's at.
Jordan, we call that not top 10, but 11. That's how we.
Right.
That's how we.
And that's fine. I think this team is built for. If we have the 11th best quarterback, I think we can be a pretty good contender. So I think it's hard to get a top 10 quarterback. So I'm okay with that.
By the way, the crew at Good Morning Football love tight end Anthony Ferkser. They're all over Anthony Ferkser. Jonnu Smith is obviously a better talent at tight end, but he's got to stay healthy. But it's good to know that there is an Anthony Ferkser right behind him that can pick up the slack there.
Yeah, he went to Harvard, and he everyone always says that, and he did have that touchdown against your Patriots in the playoffs.
Moving on to the defensive side.
I knew that was going to transition fast.
You mentioned Jadeveon Clowney is in the conversation to be a member of this team, and they could certainly use his help on their defensive line. Jeffrey Simmons, Daquan Jones, Jack Crawford, currently listed as your starters. You drafted Larrell Murchison in the 5th round. I don't know any of these other names on the depth for your defensive line, so you could certainly use help there. Your linebackers, though, Harold Landry, Rashaan Evans, Jayon Brown, Vic Beasley, you've got some talent in your linebacking core.
Yeah, I think our linebackers are definitely the strength of the defense and probably the most underrated part, because Rashaan Evans and Jayon Brown are both like studs, and I don't think people realize, especially like how many goal line stands we had over the course of the season and the playoffs. We definitely needed Vic Beasley because pass rush was our clear weakness, against the Chiefs in the playoffs. Mahomes just had all day and we had no chance. And so I do kind of think we need Clowney to be competitive with the Chiefs or the Ravens. So we'll see how that plays out. But the linebackers I'm very happy with. We have, I think, one of the best safety duos in the league with Byard and Vaccaro.
And you have depth even behind them, Amani Hooker and Dane Cruikshank. I mean, you have depth upon depth in your secondary. I mean, your secondary may not be, as you put it, they may not be elite, but they are very good. Adoree Jackson, Malcolm Butler, drafted Christian Fulton in the second round. Jonathan Joseph gets added. You have depth in your secondary.
Yeah, you are one of those guys.
Yeah, I guess I didn't mean to. I guess that sums up a lot of the Titans. We're like right below elite at like every position. So, but when you add that up together, it's like there's not many holes. I do think the one hole is the pass rush. That's what we need to fill. And like both our head coach and GM are talking openly about Clowney in a way that I never see coaches and GMs talk about free agents. So I know they just can't get him in for like the medical stuff right now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with that? But the rest of the linebacker and the secondary core, we do have a lot of depth at cornerback, and we had a lot of injuries at corner last year. We had, Butler was on the IR and missed the whole playoffs. Adoree missed about 7 games in the season. So our secondary appeared much worse last year than it actually was once they come back. We even got Jonathan Joseph from the Texans and Christian Fulton. So we do have a lot of depth there throughout the defense. I think it really just comes down to whether we can generate a pass rush or not.
Logan Ryan is still available too, who was on your team.
That's true. I mean, he's not going to be coming back, but he's a good player for whoever wants him.
I'll tell you where you do have a hole is at kicker. Greg Joseph, your current kicker, and you picked up Tucker McCann as an undrafted free agent. You're going to have a kicker competition, which is never a good thing for your special teams.
Yeah, Greg Joseph is the weirdest signing because we signed him in like week 8 or 9 last season, and we made it to the playoffs and he didn't attempt a single field goal. All he did was kick extra points for us because we had a weird stretch where we were only getting touchdowns. So and I think he went 1 for 1 in the playoffs with like a 24-yard field goal. So he's very, very untested. I will give a shout out to our punter, Brett Kern, who's the best punter in the league. He's just phenomenal. But Greg Joseph, yeah, it's a big question mark. Hopefully we won't have to kick too much, or we could be one of those teams who's signing a new kicker every week, and that would not be pretty.
All right, so there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is your AFC South previewed. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please email them, nextfanup@gmail.com. We love all of those things that I just said. At NFU Podcast on Twitter, facebook.com/NFU Podcast on Facebook. Hey, tell a friend about us. You can find us wherever great podcasts are listened to. Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, etc. All the places you can find us. And hey, if you just found us for the first time, thanks for listening. We have more division previews coming up. For now, the AFC South, there you have it.
How you doing? How are you, buddy? Trying to figure out who's going to play? Yeah. So are we.